Hello, everyone, and welcome to the career panel of deaf entrepreneurs, deaf, hard of hearing, and deaf-blind entrepreneurs. There we go. I knew I was going to get it. I'm Angela Gray, and I am the vocational rehabilitation counselor for the greater Anchorage area. We set up this panel last year. Last year, we focused on deaf professionals. This year, we're doing entrepreneurs. And really, the goal of this panel is to focus on helping deaf youth and deaf adults think of career paths that they may not have imagined for themselves prior. So we just wanted to really open up some opportunities for people to think about things a little differently and be able to use that with their voc rehab counselors or any other service providers that provide services to deaf and hard of hearing folks so that they can use this as a discussion opportunity. So with us today, I am one of your hosts. We also have my co-host with us today, who is, I will let her introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mahala Coker, and I'm here as co host with Angela. And I am also able to participate on the panel, so I'll be sharing more information about myself as we move through.
All right. So, on behalf of our Director of Services, Dwayne Mays, our statewide coordinator of deaf and hard of hearing, statewide coordinator for deaf and hard of hearing services, Gina Bastine. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Our panelists today are McLean Drake, Vanessa Guy, Mick Posner, Roger Kraft, and then Mahala joining us as well as both co-host and panelist. Mahala, I'll turn it over to you to explain the process of what people can expect and how this will proceed.
So, the process moving forward today, we will ask each panelist 6 questions in total. And it'll be about 3 minutes for each person to answer. And then if we have any time left at the end, we'll be able to open it up for questions and answers. And hopefully we'll be able to fill that in at the end. Please make sure that your video and audio is off if you are watching the panel. This is being recorded, and the interpreters are provided as you see on screen. We ask in the chat that you please be nice to each other, be respectful, and the chat itself will be monitored. Again, please hold your questions until the end, and we'll make an announcement that we can do questions and answers. And if you do have any questions during the process, please raise your hand when you announce yourself and say your name before presenting.
Okay. So with all that housekeeping done, we'll go ahead and get started with the questions. So this is Angela speaking. Angela is my sign name. And then we're going to start with McLean. McLean, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Yeah, of course, most certainly. Hi, everybody. I'm McLean Drake. It's not short for anything. It's just McLean Drake. The best way to give myself an introduction is I specialize in concerts for people who are disabled, mainly focusing on deaf, hard of hearing, and deaf blind individuals. But we have now ventured off to colorblind services and also people with high functioning autism. And we venture out beyond that. And we specialize in testing technologies, working with companies, and basically giving as much information and being a useful asset to companies and small businesses or big businesses for events, concerts. A lot of people know me for all the festivals I do, and anything in between. So that's kind of the gist of what I do. It's very vague, but it does cover a lot of ground. So yeah, I'm just happy to be here.
Thank you, McLean. And as part of your introduction, do you mind sharing with those in attendance and those watching later how you fit into the category of deaf, hard of hearing, or deafblind?
Oh yes. So I was born with a reverse slope neurological sensory hearing loss. You're actually hearing my hearing aid audio. wear hearing aids. I've worn hearing aids ever since I was about 2.5 years old, and had many different sets of hearing aids over the years. And yeah, so I have a rarer type of hearing loss, and I got it genetically through my mother, and my brother has the same similar hearing loss as well. So that is how I classify the deaf or hard of hearing business owner. So
Wonderful. Thank you, McLean, so much.
of course.
Same question. Yes. Same question. Next person. So that would be Vanessa. Mhm. Vanessa.
Hi, everyone. My name is Vanessa. Maria's here. Perfect. I'll go back and just introduce myself. My name is Vanessa Guy. My sign name looks like this. It's a V on the chest. I'm a full-time astrologist. I actually am a business owner as well. I provide various sign classes and workshops and consultant work for readings for people to look at their astrological signs. I'm very excited about it. Happy to be here.
Thank you. And Vanessa, do you identify as deaf, hard of hearing, deaf, blind?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for reminding me of that. I identify as deafblind. I've kind of found my deafblind identity when I was 11. I was diagnosed with Usher syndrome, and I kind of can explain a little bit what that looks like, and how that has impacted my work as an astrologist. But I identify as deafblind. It's really interesting how both of my worlds have really collided, and my identities have coincided with each other, which is really great. So I use, I'll describe my look like too. I'm currently wearing a blue shirt with polka dots on it, white dots, curly hair. My hair is rather short. I've got glasses on, brown glasses with a white earrings as well, right? Studded earrings. And I've got a nose stud as well. So that's me.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Nick.
Hello? Oh,
And then wanted to make sure I answered the question.
Yes, that was perfect. Thank you.
Okay, good. Perfect. Thank you. I wanted to explain a little bit my background too. I'm happy to do that as an astrologist, as a lead, but I don't want to take mixed time. So I'll step back and go ahead.
We'll get into.
Yes, I prepared a couple answers, so I wanted to make sure my first answer was right. I know introduction, and then I think there was one answer before that, so I want to make sure I didn't jump ahead of myself.
very good. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Mick Poser. My sign name is Mick. I'm originally from New York. Grew up there and kind of went from New York and Long Island as well, that area. New York City is kind of my home, my culture. I currently live in Connecticut with my family. I have a wife and 2 children, all of whom are deaf. I identify as deaf as well. I was born deaf. I do have just a little bit of hearing, and I do value that because I like music. I love music, and that's a part of my career as well. So my day job is teaching ASL in public schools. I went to college for a very long time, and I needed to make one degree useful at least. So I landed in the public school. As an entrepreneur, 2008, I got involved, and I love working with my hands. So being able to teach students, being able to using my hands, but there were some different ways there, and I wasn't quite sure. I was working on renovating my home. And so the real estate field was attractive to me. So my wife and I built a company, and then we were able to expand this real estate and business into 4 different states: Arizona, New Jersey, Connecticut, and South Carolina. And New Jersey is currently a structure or construction company that I'm a partner in. So I have a little bit of everything in each of those areas. And in Arizona, it's a little unique because the people that I'm in partnership there are all deaf, and we hire only deaf individuals, deaf construction workers. It's deaf only to be able to provide those opportunities. The real estate in Arizona is a 10-unit building. And so it needs constant renovation. There's just something going on there all the time. So I thought, why not be able to provide those opportunities for deaf, hard of hearing? So in New Jersey, they're all hearing, but we've been working on educating them and, starting to like, hey, we need to get some deaf people in the door, so they're capable of doing the same job. So I think also there was when I saw this advertised, I looked in 2020 when there was COVID and everybody was just kind of sitting back. I needed to be able to keep myself busy. So I went to the grocery store and there was a woman there who saw me signing with my kids. They were with me, and she's like, "Hey, would you mind doing an online class? Maybe you could set something up online through the library or something." And I was like, "Oh, maybe." But the library online class has now gone to over 500 students within a year. So, and I'm going to be selling that business to another company. So that's kind of a little bit of my background where I am right now.
Wow. So you're not just a one-time entrepreneur, you're a multiple-time entrepreneur. Thank you, Mick, for joining us.
Versatile, definitely versatile. Got a lot of things going on. I like to be active. Even this sitting at this point just for this evening is difficult. I need to be going, doing something.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And then Roger, please introduce yourself.
Perfect. Absolutely. Hello, everyone. Good to be here. Mick, I actually used to teach ASL classes at a college level. So you explaining some of those things definitely takes me back. It was a fun experience for me. I really enjoyed it. I haven't taught for almost 2 years at this point. I left that educational field, but I really find myself figuring out what are some of the different ways I can get back to teaching ASL because it was just so much fun. Anyway, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Roger Kraft. I live here in Indiana. I've been here for about 14 years now, but I still consider myself raised in Maryland, a true person from Maryland. So I left Maryland, but you can't actually leave. You can't take the Maryland out of me. You leave the state, but you can't take it out of me. So definitely love my home state. I'll explain a little bit about my journey in work and starting up some of the businesses that I have, and then I know I'll be able to get into it more on the questions following. So I'm married. I have 4 children. All of them are CODAs. There's no K in the C anymore. They're adults now. True, all of them are a lot older. So sometimes there's kind of a thing where if they're children, you add the K, so it's kids of deaf adults, but they are children of deaf adults. All of them are college age. 2 of them, the oldest ones, are out on their own, and so we are empty nesters, me and my wife, at this point. So kind of learning what that means, traveling a little bit more, kind of exploring the world and participating in various events that we would not be able to do so before kids. So like this panel, for example, excited to be here. I think, of course, I know deaf individuals always have to know like the story of why certain things happened. So if you can see on my arm here, I'll go ahead and explain it without having a lot of questions about it. So a little bit about me. It was caused by pickleball, if we have any fans in the house, and also playing some games with friends. So I think it was it's just very fast-paced games, and it requires a lot of patience. And one of them was disc golf. So it definitely takes time. You have to stretch and you have to warm up before some of these activities. And I'm not obviously very good at it because I have an injury. So if some of you see me wearing something weird on my arm, that is it. I know the deaf community is usually like, hold on, explain that first. Let me make sure I understand what that is. So if you see it, that's what it is. Yeah. So and happy to be here this afternoon or evening, whatever time it is in the state that you're at.
Wonderful, Roger. Thank you so much for joining us. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mahala. Mahala, as my co-host and one of our panelists, please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. My name is Mahala Coker, And I am a female. I have short, curly hair. I do have earrings on and a dark blue shirt. And I'm in my 40s. So I am here today because Angela invited me to be here, and I am so excited to participate. My name is M off of the chest. I am myself deaf. I was born deaf, and I grew up signing and speaking at the same time. I use access to interpreters through mainstream school education all the way through, and I grew up in Oregon. And I now live up here in Alaska for the last 20 years. Alaska, I feel like, is definitely my home. So 20 years, it seems like such a long time, but it went by in a blink of an eye. So I have a mother. I am a mother, and I have 5 children. And now one is an adult and all the way to 15. So I do have 2 children themselves who are hard of hearing and also autistic. I have just established my own business as Alaska Services, Comprehensive Services. Again, that's Alaska Comprehensive because it includes everything in the services that I provide. And I just established that last year. So I am a newer entrepreneur. And I also am a landlord in addition to running an Airbnb and being a host for that. So those are all really new and exciting adventures that I am taking on. I did work for 20 years with the state of Alaska, and now I am working as my own business, which has its own challenges, and we'll discuss as we move further.
Thank you so much, Mihaela. So now everyone knows our panelists a little bit. Vanessa, I saw your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to watch their comments. It was so good. It's so great. I didn't do this when I was introducing myself. So I remember in high school, I learned how to just like introduce myself and kind of write who I was. So I just want to thank everyone for their introductions. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to knowing more of you more, and wanted to give a little background about myself as well. I was raised in North Carolina. I forgot to say this. Raised in North Carolina, went to the deaf school there, graduated Gallaudet University in social work specifically, and I had already kind of been interested in the astrological world, and I was probably around the age of 18, reading charts, kind of doing a lot of those things. And I actually lived on Marshall Island for a while, for about 3 years after graduation from Gallaudet. Ended up working over there. I worked with deaf children as a volunteer teacher. Then I moved back to America in 2018 and worked as a social worker in New York City. I stayed there for roughly 3 years, and once I kind of finished the social work, I went ahead and started my own business in astrology in 2020. And I'll explain a little bit more from there, but wanted to thank everyone for introducing themselves and wanted to add a little bit more description on mine. I wrote it down, but wanted to make sure I added that as well. So thank you everyone for that.
This is Angela speaking, and yes, thank you all of our panelists for those great introductions. Now everyone knows who we're dealing with and why we're here today, so thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Mihaela, who's going to start asking our first panelist the second question of the evening.
So our second question for our panelists is, McLean, you'll start us off. How did you get into your field of employment? How did you get started in that area?
Man, this is always such an interesting question. So I obviously grew up with a hearing loss. So majority of my life, I didn't talk a lot about my hearing loss in general, just because I went to do like modeling and acting earlier on in my life, because I just did theater in high school and whatnot. And so when I was about 22, a buddy of mine wanted me to play Han Solo. I didn't know anything about Star Wars, but he asked if I would play Han Solo, and I'm like, sure. And he's like, can you get me a location that looks futuristic? We need a nightclub. And I'm like, I don't, I don't know any nightclubs. Like, oh, well, you're really good with people. And so through that, I became good friends with the owner of one of our biggest venues in Salt Lake City. It's called Sky, and the guy was like, yeah, you can use our venue for free. We really like you. Hey, if you want, you can come out to shows because you really like EDM shows and music. I'm like, okay, I'll go out. And so I just went out all the time with them over the weekends. It's very great talking to them about business. And a couple months down the line, they was like, "Hey, so why don't you think your shows are great?" And I'm like, no, I don't think so. Because like, if I was more hard of hearing or deaf, like, I just wouldn't understand objectively what's going on. I know I'm very fortunate to have my hearing to be able to understand, and it's not the greatest show because I can think of many things you could change just from the perspective of my view. And so we went and talked, and he's like, "Well, I'll give you the venue for free to do whatever you want. The only caveat is you have to do it all. I don't know anything about the deaf community. I don't know. I could just provide you whatever you need. Give you." I'm like, "I don't do shows," and I didn't know the deaf community as well. And but I figured, you know what? It can't be that hard. And if an opportunity presents itself, you always take it. So from there, I did the first deaf concert that I did, which was on the news, and uh, companies like Listen Technology, who does a lot of ADA work, they all reached out to me and they wanted to be involved. And then from there, it just kind of spiraled into me meeting movie theater chains who wanted help with accessibility, live performances who wanted help, music festivals, Skull Candy, who also I have a great partnership with. They wanted to be involved with the deaf. Mr. Beast, one of the biggest YouTubers. My friends work for them and they want to do something for the hard of hearing community. And so from there, it just kind of, as much as I didn't think it would consume my life from there, it just took on a life of its own, and all these different opportunities come up, and I always try and take on as much as I can because if I don't, then it may not be presented again, and I want to make sure it gets done right. So that's kind of how I got to the position I am right now and got involved in this field in general.
And this is Angela. I'm going to ask a follow-up question.
Oh,
I'll put
great.
you on the spot on this one because what you said when you got started, you didn't know much about the deaf community. Um,
Mhm.
so was this trial by fire, learn by trial and error, or how did you get some of the background information on deaf culture, deaf needs, so that you could be able to meet that need within the scope of your business?
Yes, a great question. So yeah, when I started out, I went from a lot of what I grew up, what I enjoyed with live music, which is a lot of vibrational, because I had a reverse slope. I enjoyed feeling subwoofers and because I didn't want to damage my high end frequencies, but I also really love feeling the music through my bones. So I was always like, I gotta figure it out. So I have like a subwoofer in my car. And so I did the first show. I was like, well, we can adjust sound so there's more bass and then not, damage people's hearing. But then I realized that that caused an issue. And then other deaf people I met, they told me about experiences where they held balloons so they can feel vibration. There's other people who like the sub packs, which I work with them a little bit. There's different ways of how they enjoy vibration, but ultimately they just wanted to feel vibration. It wasn't about making things louder. So from there, I learned how to weld. So then I could make vibrating platforms that took sound waves and put it into strictly just vibration. So then people didn't have to carry something around with them. They could just stand on a platform. And so when I did that, like the deaf and blind school out in our school in our area, they wanted me to do all their school dances because nobody really looked into stuff like that. But yeah, a lot of how I incorporate new things is companies reaching out and saying, we think we have a solution. And I go, okay, well, let's test it out. I'm not going to stand by your product or what you do or what we say we do because there's always room to grow. And even today, I always stand by that. There's not one solution for everything. There's always logistical nightmares with any sort of disability, and figuring out a solution. It can be different things, different technologies, and so um, working with the deaf community, the deaf schools, the advisory boards, I get a lot of new information and I test out a lot more information and provide that to the community so then they know what they can ask for and what actually would be good for them. So, yeah, hope that answers your question.
This is Angela, and it did. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you so much. And now Oh, I forget your name sign. I'm so sorry, Denise. There you go. So, same question to you. How did you get into your field? How did you establish your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So for thank you so much for the background. I really appreciate that. Yeah, so I think in astrology it's very unique. There's not a lot of people who are involved in this career. It's kind of an odd career, and a lot of people might not necessarily think of it as a full-time job. Oftentimes people say that, and there are comments made along those lines. So I've been studying for about 14 years just as a self-taught individual, someone who's just passionate and interested in the topic. Like I said, I've been just kind of studying it and doing it myself. I'm always been interested in the more spiritual things, in tarot cards, in medium, in just various aspects of that palm reading. So I recognize that something that's very common that comes up in all of those is a lot of the astrological signs and a lot of these things that go back to the foundation of what astrology is and the stars, and reading a lot about what that looks like. So I think it's essentially the foundation for everything is what I came up with. Stars are the mother of science, and from there you kind of have these streamlines where you have math and science and these academic things. But if you go back, the stars are the ones that really cause a lot of these influxes that have influenced so much of our life and our studying and academics today. So a lot of people, you see how your interactions with individuals and relationships to work and all that, how you work with people, how you do a lot of these things to make sure that your just daily interactions, it's a lot of it's based on your birth year, your birth time. And if you take all of those three things, you can kind of essentially create a map to show your life story. And that's one of the things that's always fascinated me from a very early age, is how people can actually just based on these three aspects be able to really see their life and be able to really understand more about who they are. And so when I moved to Marshall Islands, I saw a lot of deaf children there who had absolutely no language. They were language deprived. They didn't, I mean, they could barely say their names. They were just young, deaf individuals. They didn't know their own age. It was just an incredibly interesting and sad situation. So having to make connections with a lot of these children was difficult. And I always thought went back to astrology and how can I use that to really connect with some of these students and to make it beneficial and understand them better. So that really helped me essentially, like being able to look at some of these students' star charts and and just be able to connect with them on like maybe a deeper level other than the language that they were struggling to do. For instance, they couldn't do a lot of math. So I would go back to their birth chart and see exactly and learn what kind of style they would be learning in, what are different what are the four elements that impact how they learn. For instance, if that individual needs more of a physical senses, using taste, using feelings, using those kind of aspects, maybe even food, M&Ms to bring in that math concept so they can learn a little bit better. And I would try to study, like, again, what those individuals, what those children, their birth charts were, so that I could figure out how to teach them these basic academic concepts, like using red M&Ms if they did have that more physical nature and they learned a little bit better in that way. I remember, like 2 + 3 = 5, and then using M&M so they could touch it and they could see it. So that's just kind of an example of how I used astrology to really impact my life. And as a self-taught individual, I was able to kind of use that and have that as a starter for this career that I'm in. So on Marshall Island, we didn't have any Wi-Fi. It was a very laid back lifestyle. Life was kind of just by the water. It was very beach time. You had a very small place, very small geographical location that you lived in, and the moon was right there. So I would constantly just be connected with the moon phases and studying what that looks like and how it would impact the children that I was teaching, the deaf kids on that island. So that kind of made astrology for me something that just that experience, something that I really wanted to do. So when I moved back to America after that in 2018, I went to New York City and I became a social worker, as I stated earlier, and working in social work with clients who were completely deaf. And it was essentially under the Child Protective Services, CPS, which some of you I'm sure are familiar with. So working with children, working with families, and one of the biggest things is that there were barriers to a lot of these services, or they wouldn't want these services. So I would try to like work with them and try to make some of the important connections that I think were good as a social worker. But at the same time, I was seeing like how like astrology could really open up some of the possibilities for these individuals if they just understood how they were living through life and how they were experiencing life, and possibly being able to shift their focus a little bit more. So I was able to use some of these to just impact my clients and create further relationships with them, possibly benefit them in the long run as well for just understanding themselves better. So after social work, I wanted to become an astrologist full time, but unfortunately, I had experienced a lot of barriers. My experience previously in college was very a traditional, become a social worker, become a teacher. Like it was kind of that traditional path that I was encouraged to go down. And as no one really tells you to become an astrologist. Most astrology schools are, you have to pay for an interpreter out of pocket. So that was one of the biggest. Not only would I have to pay for school, but also an interpreter. So that's kind of why I went the more self-taught method, because I had no access to a lot of these higher education for people who want to become astrology. So social media, podcasts, a lot of them don't have captions. YouTube videos don't have captions. So just facing a lot of barriers, which is really frustrating for me as someone who wanted to learn even more. So I went ahead and established an astrology business in 2020 at the time that COVID was just coming around as well. So the deaf community, I knew exactly what they were going through as an astrologist, and I was able to set up this business in a time that was definitely a harder time, but provide classes and workshops and consultations to really help the deaf community and ways, and connect them with just more understanding of who they are. So I've had a lot of people, over hundreds of people, taking my classes all over the world, requesting consultation services from me. So that was kind of my story. And now I'm essentially a full-time astrologist. I've been in this role for 3 years after I quit social work. So it's definitely difficult. Social work had that security, the benefits, all of the salary that was stable. And then coming to astrology, where you kind of leave that stability, has definitely been a challenge. I'm a business owner, entrepreneur, and so that definitely is hard, leaving that steady lifestyle. But at the same time, it's just been an amazing shift, and I'll be able to talk about that a little bit more later. But I'll go ahead and stop my answer for there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. It's so fascinating, and I can't wait to learn more about your story. So, passing it now on to Mick. Same question. How did you get started in your multiple business adventures, and how did you navigate all of that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I wanted to thank McLean for all of your work. You had mentioned Skull Candy. My headphones that I use, actually, here they are right here, are Skull Candy brand, and they are the best with haptics. The vibration and the bass, it is just the best, absolutely the best. So thank you for that, for your work on that. So my field is a little bit more direct in this way. I was fortunate to have many great teachers growing up who influenced me in positive influences throughout my education. And so I think I envisioned becoming a teacher like them. And that was my goal for a while, was just to become a teacher. So that was kind of a no-brainer for a lot of years. And starting the business, so when I was so young, um, I started a landscaping company, just a small, right in the neighborhood, and that was kind of the start of my entrepreneurial experience. And then getting through that through college, I also did some snow plowing as well as a part of that business. And then I put that on hold for to be able to focus on my family and my career and getting married and all of those things for a while. So that was on hold for several years. And then several years ago, and then my father was actually an accountant. So, and I was very fortunate that he taught me the value of saving money and how to do it, building capital. It's hard with a family, right? You go growing family, things come in and out. But one day, I was talking with my wife, and I said, I want to do something different. I mean, I don't mind teaching, but I feel like I have more to offer. So thinking about maybe offering contract work, but my friends were involved there. They said that it was a tough field and there's a lot of barriers. They were struggling with that, because there's a lot of competition. And so my wife said, well, hey, why not real estate? What about that? And that led us to watching YouTube and taking various things. And the same thing with what Vanessa said too, no captioning and lack of access, and things were weird captioning. Auto captioning was just inaccurate. So one thing led to another over the years, and then it was kind of the snowball effect, where you start something with like just the one property that we had, and that snowballed to another property. And then we started meeting more people and networking through that. And I think that was really my path. It's not quite as exciting as maybe others, but there it is.
This is Angela. And no, that sounds plenty exciting still.
I just learned to listen to my wife very well, so I'm grateful for that.
I'm not going to start that discussion, but I'm sure there are many people who would agree with you that yes, just listen to the wife. The wife typically has the answer.
You got it. And she's the better half. She's the smart one.
This is Mahala. Thank you so much, Mick, for that. And now on to Roger. It is your turn. Same question. How did you get into your field?
Yeah, absolutely. So the issue is that I don't listen to my wife. That's the problem. So as much as I should, essentially. So I'm still learning on that. I'm 55 and I still have some time. So I still actually don't, I'm going to admit, I actually still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. It's still a journey. There's so many different things that I like. So many things that interest me. So I work as a CDI, a certified deaf interpreter, full time, essentially a freelance interpreter. And what that means is that I am at different locations. So I'm in the community, interpreting in the Indianapolis, greater Indianapolis area, going to doctor's appointments, going to vocational rehabilitation meetings, platform, audience work. So in interpreting for those type of settings, essentially, I have a hearing ASL interpreter who's feeding me. And then the other one is I do VRI, video remote interpreting, where I stay here in my office. I've got my background here and I interpret on video. Again, usually it's teamed with a hearing ASL interpreter most of the time. And then third is probably the biggest part of my work as a whole has been translation. So as some of you know, interpreting and translation are two completely different facets. Interpreting is something that's more happens in the moment. It's on the spot between two languages, English to ASL, and back and forth, vice versa. Whereas translation, on the other hand, is often you have a lot of time to think about it, to really process what the frozen English text is saying, and then how you can really, what are some of the intentions and the goals of the speaker, of the writer, and then what are some of the best ways to translate that into sign language. So, and sometimes usually what that is that sign language is recorded and kept forever and put in public spaces for individuals to watch at a later time, usually for 5 or 10 years down the road. So obviously you want to make sure that that translation work is just pristine. Interpreting itself, it's impossible to make that as perfect as it can be in the moment, essentially. You know that you can use different words, you can use different signs, and there's definitely tools. However, with translation, you can almost make it as perfect as it can possibly be. So it's a little bit of a different beast to encounter. So with my CDI, Certified Deaf Interpreter, why I kind of got into that field is I was meeting a lot of individuals who were coming up to me and saying, what does this mean? Just growing up in Maryland. And so that kind of sparked a passion in me of explaining, or just really teaching essentially and explaining more in depth in sign language what certain concepts mean. I'll talk a little bit more about this in the third question, but in 2009, I moved here to Indianapolis, Indiana, from Sioux Falls in South Dakota. So in Sioux Falls, there was it was very small. I think it's probably similar to Anchorage area, roughly. But Sioux Falls really had an amazing ASL interpreting services there. It was fantastic. And there was one deaf organization where everything was, they had just great collaboration. There were interpreting services provided for various individuals all over the city. And then they actually had passed a law in South Dakota where all of the interpreters, anyone who was providing interpreting services in South Dakota had to be certified. So if a person did not have that certification and they wanted to interpret in South Dakota, they had to there could be some penalties, some very serious penalties, even jail time for that. So that was a law that was passed in the early 2000s. So the standard for interpreting services in Sioux Falls or South Dakota in general was incredibly high. So I got used to living there. I was there for roughly 9 years. And when I moved to Indianapolis, Indiana, Indianapolis was a bigger city. There's about 800,000 people, close to 1 million if you really take in consideration the surrounding areas. But the interpreting services were completely different and much subpar to what I experienced in South Dakota. So it was definitely different, and that led me to forming my own interpreting agency in Indiana in 2011. We were very successful at we did reach out to deaf consumers in the greater Indianapolis area to build their profile, essentially. So we would reach out and ask for their preferred interpreters, who they wanted, what types of interpreters they needed to fulfill the services that they were requesting. And once we were able to do that, we would be able to send the information to the deaf client about who the interpreter was, even a day or 2 days before the appointment actually happened, which at the time was not standard in Indiana or Indianapolis. The other part of our agency was we provided training and workshops. One of those ones was for CDIs. So anyone who was interested in becoming a certified deaf interpreter, we would provide support and training for them. So me as the agency owner, I honestly didn't know much. Even though I owned the agency, I didn't know much about that. So I would go to some workshops, and I thought it was very interesting. I went ahead and took a couple trainings myself and went to some conferences. They took the RID, their CDI certification, deaf interpreter written and also performance test. I passed both of them. Barely, I will say that. It was before 2016 when RID actually had a moratorium. So I got super lucky by taking it in just the right time and being able to do that, because after that there was a moratorium where they ended up reassessing some of the tests, and there was kind of a long pause. I believe it was for about 6 years where no one could do that. So looking back, I'm really lucky that I took that right at the right time. There were many deaf individuals who you see deaf interpreters who aren't quite certified, and by no means is that out of lack of trying. They definitely just have not been able to because of the moratorium, which is now since opened, which is great. So I'm lucky to find myself in that situation where I was a certified interpreter in that time. So I was a certified interpreter, and then I also later accepted a job at a college teaching ASL classes and some interpreting classes as well in the program ITP there. I did that for roughly 5 years. I wish that college had more, were a little more open-minded to seeing how that program could grow. But when I was there was just a lot of red tape, and they were trying to keep the program at a level which was only good enough, and not necessarily being able to grow the program in ways that I would have liked to see it grow, in ways that would have made it more robust and a better system, a better product in the end. So I left that and have been a full-time certified deaf interpreter for about 2 years now, and that brings me to where I am now. So that is a very tight summary of the last couple years.
Thank you so much for that story. It's so amazing. It's absolutely awesome. And now it's my turn. Whew. Okay, so I asked myself the same question. So, giving you just a little bit of background about who I am, getting me to where I am today. So, really, I started about 20 years ago And I was an intern here at DVR, the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. And I was providing services here in Anchorage, Alaska. And I was a VRC1, so vocational rehab counselor. And then I worked my way up to a VRC3. And then I became the statewide coordinator for the deaf and hard of hearing, deaf blind services across the state of Alaska. And during that time, I had the opportunity to be involved in various types of training that really helped me provide better services to our deaf, blind, and hard of hearing individuals. And while that time I was providing services, I started to kind of notice or try to provide different services to our deaf and hard of hearing clients. And I experienced many barriers that providers were unaware of, or they didn't have the language exposure, and they weren't able to learn the language first on the best way of how to communicate with these individuals, or if they were attending school, making sure they were getting the appropriate accommodations and language access. There was so much language deprivation, and language deprivation just means that they didn't have access to language. It was nothing that was taken away from them. They were just never provided the opportunity or had the exposure to the language itself. So they missed out on so many opportunities, and then we were providing not appropriate services, and it becomes a mental health concern. And so watching that tendency and then seeing these individuals really struggle in what they needed to be provided as services, I was recognizing that independent living skills was a huge gap of what individuals needed to survive. And they needed to have the ability to have an assessment done to see where those gaps specifically were, making sure they understood their rights, having rights to getting an interpreter, what to do if they're hanging out with friends, how to budget, and how to just do everyday living that we might take for granted. They didn't have that opportunity of learning. So I made that decision after about 20 years of working with vocational rehab as counselor and statewide coordinator that I was going to step away and open my own business. So I kind of have two approaches. One is doing the independent living skills really specific for our deaf and hard of hearing communities, and communication assessments. The communication assessments are not for assistive technology, but it is more focused on asking the individuals questions related to their history, related to their language, and what is best for their ways of communicating. And how do they communicate out in the community? What things do they notice that work best for them as an individual? And what have the experiences that they have that they kind of learned at the school of hard knocks per se. So making sure they have all of those ready, making sure that they have the supports that they would then need that they could get from DVR or other providers. I then created Alaska Comprehensive Services, which I then am now able to provide services to the community where those gaps were, I try to fill them. And so I'm also able to help provide those work supports as well. So for that part, that is encompassing of that. And then the other portion of my job is working with my husband in real estate as well. He is very knowledgeable about purchasing properties, where we should purchase, and the market, good and bads to all of that. So he has been learning, and now I am learning as well. And we co-own, and being a landlord and running an Airbnb, it is so enjoyable, so much to learn. There's so many figuring out what clients like, what clients do not like, and trying to figure out why they're coming here to Alaska and how we can make that experience more enjoyable. So in summary, I think that's everything.
And this is Angela. You know what? Last year we started this, and this is our second year doing it. And before this, I always get a little nervous, like, oh, how many people are going to be tuning in? How many mistakes am I going to make? But then I get to hear all of these cool stories about how everyone got into these very cool, interesting fields and all of the wealth of information they have. And I'm not nervous anymore. So thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, Mahela, go ahead.
This is Michaela again. Just wanted to add, I feel the same as you, Vanessa, that really struggling and making that transition from working as a state employee for almost 20 years, having that structure and stability, good pay, good benefits, and then deciding to give that up and transition to the unknown. Whew, that was a challenge, but it is a wonderful experience. So when you were explaining that, I definitely could feel that too.
Yeah, I think that's called trial and error. You make the mistakes as you go, and then you just kind of learn and take responsibility for that, and then learn as you get to going forward. So that's part of being a business owner, is just taking that and learning from the mistakes, or learning from the barriers that have been placed there, and trying to figure out how to overcome them. So yeah, thank you for that.
All right. Well, our next question number 3, we're going to start with McLean. What training and support did you receive to become successful? Although I kind of cheated and I asked you a little bit about that in the last one. But what training and support did you receive to become successful? Did this include college, a vocational program, mentoring, accommodations? What supports helped you become successful, and what needed to happen along the way?
Uh, I mean, there's a whole lot of things I think that attribute to why I'm able to do the things I get to do. I think a lot of it comes from support and people who realize I'm genuine with what I want to do and my ultimate goals with it. Um, I did, when I was younger, I did have a scholarship to go to college, but I didn't like going to college because the things I was interested in, there was not a degree that would set me on the course for something that I'd be passionate about. So though my parents hated me for it, I did not go to college. But I think over time, when they've seen me go on the news and go do big concerts and meet the artists I get to meet and invite them to certain artists they love to see, because I work a lot with these festivals, they understand. They may not understand to the level I do it at, but it's not why I do it to begin with. Um, but yeah, mentors. I have so many different various mentors. I got mentoring when I was an actor. I would say growing up with a lot of the support group I had allowed me to be just not uh, as affected by things if people told me I can't do certain things. I mean, even making things like the platforms, people are like, no one makes platforms. Like, you don't even know how to weld. I'm like, well, I'll figure it out. Like, as long as someone is willing to tell me how I need to do it and kind of give me the basic core things, the YouTube's free, and I have many friends and many talented friends who, if they care about the things I care about, just like I would care about the things they would because they're my friends, they would help me. And I mean, there's many different things, many different sound engineers many different hearing allies I've had over the years who lend me their knowledge on things. And so I can't really, this is like the one question where I can't attribute to any one person. I always know that there's going to be someone else who's going to know more than me, and I will be very thankful for them as I come along. And I always approach it. I don't know everything, but I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to apply. And I'm willing to help them out, so then they know how they can help our community out and help their community out and the things that we know. So hopefully that gives a good enough answer, but everyone's gonna have a better answer. So this might be the section where I'm a little bit lamer. So there.
And this is Angela speaking. No, I don't think better is the right word. They're all going to be different. What I liked about your answer is you have an approach of everyone being your mentor. So at no point in your answer did you say that you were the expert, you knew everything, and people should be learning from you. No, you very much have an approach of everybody out there has something that you can learn, and so that's an underrated skill, I think, approaching people and situations with a humbleness to be able to say, no, you have something you can teach me, and I'm eager to learn that. So no, you had a great answer, and I'm gonna make you stand by it.
Well, all right. If you're gonna hold me to it, fine. I'm
I
sorry.
am.
Hopefully my mom's not disappointed, but I'll take it.
Vanessa, the next question goes to you. What sort of um, training or support did you receive to become successful? Did that include, well, you did talk about college a little bit, you talked about some of your own training and being self-taught, but what other sort of mentoring, accommodation, supports, what helped you become successful along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. McLean, I really support that. I think that everyone considers needs a mentor in their life, and everyone needs kind of, I don't know, plays the role of a teacher. I think teachers show up when the students are ready, and that's an important thing to recognize. Am I doing something wrong? Am I doing something right? And just there's these individuals who come into our lives that really are supportive. So thankful. Yeah, absolutely. I think I have experience with just people in my life who have challenged me and caused really good discussions and conversations. My partner, my friends. Like I was saying, with if I wanted to become like more of a more go to school for astrology, it would be difficult because a lot of times these schools in America, at least, are very small. And with the ADA, they do have to pay for interpreters, but they don't have a lot of the resources to do that. So it was definitely a big challenge for me. I hosted a program recently for interpreters who wanted to interpret more astrology. I know there's a lot of resources for interpreters who want to do science or medical or these kind of things, but I think having some specific things for interpreters who are really interested in astrology and wanting to interpret in these types of settings, and I was able to teach some of them and some of the signs and offer some classes for them themselves to come and kind of learn how I can, if I need an astrology interpreter, how they can do that. So essentially, I would have to pay an interpreter, though, to go to those classes. And what's really unfortunate is that many disabled people have to work 3 times harder than hearing people, who just want to go and take a class. But we have to do all of this work behind the scenes. Like I said, paying, negotiating, and working with interpreters to go and figure out how that works and all the things just to go take a class that a hearing person just has to sign up for. A lot of interpreters are willing to volunteer, discounted rates and all that. So they definitely wanted me to reach my goal of becoming a professional astrologist and getting certifications that I needed. So I'm so thankful for them. I'm also super thankful for my partner who's in my life. My partner was one of the reasons I essentially started this business, because she was the business owner herself. She runs an interpreting agency and has a lot of experience within this realm, and was able to give me some good advice and was like, you should just go ahead and do this. And when I was kind of doubting myself, I was like, no, this doesn't sound like something I should do. She was explaining some of the pros of it is that you're going to give deaf people this whole community, this access to information that they probably never had before. So I'm really thankful for her guidance and her leading me on this direction, and officially leading to me starting the business in 2020. So like I said, I was self-taught mostly for about 14 years, navigating through a lot of this information on my own. When I set up the business, at that point, I realized hearing people in the astrology world started to recognize me as my business name is Astro Woke. The sign looks like this. So I started to get recognized within several of these communities. And there was a lot of like competition for some grants and some opportunities for people to go to different schools and learn more about astrology. So receiving some money grants where I could actually go to some of these academic locations to learn more about the profession. So when I got some of that, I was able to do that. And so I've been able to attend some of these people. There's a lot of people I have supporting me. Whenever I doubt myself or anything like that, I've got a whole group of people behind me supporting them or supporting me. So I really appreciate it. A lot of them just telling me to go ahead and do it and to dive right into a lot of the things that I'm doing. So currently I'm actually in an academic program right now. I'll become certified this fall. After I've been taking a lot of these classes. I think it's been about 2 or 3 years that I've been in this. I haven't, it's there, but I finally have been able to get everything worked out with support and people and all these things that needed to happen. Again, I think it's just kind of just a lot of individuals, and me especially, immersed in that spiritual realm and just able to kind of get everything worked together, which has just been so beneficial to me. And I'm really appreciative of all the people behind me who've been supporting me.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, I had Your world is a world I haven't dabbled in much, if I'm honest, but I can only imagine the challenges of trying to get the training necessary to be able to start a business, let alone receive grant money for um, like being well known and well respected in your field as well. So yeah, that's so impressive and so amazing. Thank you for sharing your
And the
story.
interpreter is part of it as well. Like getting all that worked out is a whole nother thing.
Right. And that's part of why we have these discussions. I see you, Roger, is so that we can show people that yes, this is challenging, this is hard, but it is possible. Roger, go ahead.
True. Yeah, I just wanted to add a comment as well, Vanessa. Just your journey reminds me a lot of that cartoon. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it shows the deaf and hearing individuals together, and they're essentially in a race. And the hearing individual, their path to the finish line is easy. It's just a paved, smooth path with almost no barriers. Versus the deaf individual is full of hills and rocks and hurdles and all of these barriers. There's even like a river flowing through it, and they have to dodge all of these things. But they start at the same place and they finish at the same place. But getting there is so much more difficult. So yeah, you are definitely an overcomer. So just my hats off to you. There's so many things that you've done that has been amazing. Really, really enjoy hearing your story.
Thank you, Roger, for that. That's helpful, and that's part of the reason we include this question is looking to see, yeah, what sort of support are deaf, hard of hearing, and deafblind business owners using to be successful? Because that might be something for other aspiring entrepreneurs to be able to consider for themselves. If developing their own business is a new dream for them, awesome, cool. How do they do that? So we're hoping that you guys become role models in that process. Nick, the floor gets turned over to you. What sort of supports, training, what needed to happen in order for you to be successful and where you're at today?
Okay. So I think in regards to support, well, I guess I'll start with the training piece first. I always tell people that I graduated from two different universities. University of RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, and the second university is the University of YouTube. So I think that my RIT education, I majored in philosophy. And but the problem with that was no one was willing to pay me to explain what that means in life, right? So I had to go to plan B, and that was education. And again, I knew I wanted to teach, so that was pretty straightforward. I think on the other hand, with establishing my own business, I think that going through that experience, I've made a lot of mistakes. I bought properties that devalued. There were various things and various people who didn't pay their rent, who refused to move out. There were, people who destroy properties intentionally. There's just a host of issues. But I think, people who use children as their front to prevent themselves from being evicted. And, I have a soft spot for a lot of those situations, but it's a balancing act of, learning how these systems work. And that you can't just go through it without the support of a variety of people that I've met just through life, being able to take advantage of their experience. For example, oftentimes you might face people who can't pay their rent. And there may be a legitimate reason for that. But again, maybe there's a family that's, but I'm able to learn from somebody who's kind of had that life experience, check in with them and just kind of say, what do I need to know so that I can meet them where they're at? But at the same time, I have to be that business owner. I have a family to support. I have a business to run. And so being able to balance that, I think that there's a lot of that what's already been mentioned, right? Is that there's a variety of kind of mentorship. And in philosophy, there is one thing I learned from Socrates. Socrates said, we really know nothing. So my strategy in learning how to do things is I look for people who have failed in real estate. And I ask them like, okay, hey, what went wrong? One of them was actually my wife's cousin. And they weren't happy to be asked that question, but I did ask very nicely. But they went through this, and he just said, his real estate business went downhill. He believed, what this is what went wrong. And I took that and I learned more from that than everybody's like, oh, here we go. It's all great. YouTube says it's wonderful. But I'm able to learn from him and be able to apply that. And I think he told me, that he told me not to go into real estate, but, or excuse me, he told me to go into real estate. So I think that, there's a lot to be learned there. And there's just a little bit of everything. Being able to, use your best judgment. Sometimes you have to take information with the grain of salt. That's in there as well. And sometimes you just gotta just do it. You just gotta go for it. Yeah, so I think that's it for me.
Well, I'm gonna make a nerdy reference and say that I don't know that I would pay you for the meaning of life, the answer to the meaning of life, because we all know that the answer is 42. So I don't have to pay you for that. We just know it. We just have to read a book and watch a movie and it tells us, right? Okay, good. Someone here got it. So I don't have to explain that one. But thank you, Mick, for sharing. Roger, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. What sort of training, support, accommodations, what needed to happen for you to be the success you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So Mick's comment about his wife's cousin is, again, that's kind of to the point, that quote, not experience, but you learn more from mistakes. Mistakes are kind of the best teacher, something exactly like that. I'm not sure exactly the right word, but you get the idea. That's kind of the best way to learn, is from various mistakes. And success stories are fine, but when you kind of take a look at the mistakes, I think that that's a little bit more impactful. So my training was really, I know some of you might see CDI, Certified Deaf Interpreter, and wonder how that applies and what trainings we require. It's kind of been something that I've been doing my lifelong, essentially, I would say, is contributing. A lot of what I've done historically has contributed to where I am today. So I went to Gallaudet, graduated from there. I did my undergrad there. And then once that was over, I went ahead and started benefiting from the school. I went for a master's program. Again, it was in Gallaudet. I majored in administration and supervising. And then at the same time, I was running the dorm as like one of the 6 of us in the staff that was helping run the dorm. I was one of the managers for that. Plus, I was responsible for the dorm, the well-being of the dorm, making sure that everything went well, that there were services being provided. If things broke, coming in and fixing some of them. There were students, about 200 students that I was there, making sure that they had everything that they needed. And of course, the freshman dorm that I was overseeing had a lot of challenges, but it also was really fun. So I was working there at the same time getting my master's degree. And I learned a lot about administration and supervision. And at the same time, in the evenings, with my staff meetings or something like that, I would be able to apply what I was learning in the daytime to the job I was working at night, which was really helpful to have that just immediate implementation of the education that I was getting. If there were conflicts or anything that would come up in the evening, I was able to go back to my classmates the next morning and say, hey, from this situation, what would you guys do? This is what happened, and this was the scenario. So I think that was really impactful. It was very beneficial for me to kind of have that going on simultaneously. So you had the theory in the classroom and then the actual action of it in the evening. So I think that taught me so much. So once I was done with my master's program, I moved to Wisconsin for about 4 years. I was all over the state of Wisconsin working at that time. I know people are going to look at me. I'm old if I say this, but one of the very first it wasn't VRS, it was TRS at the time. So not video remote services. It was a type-based service. I think it was 1992 or something like that. And all the states mandated to have a TRS service. It was essentially, you had a TTY and you had an operator at the other end of it. So I was going around the state of Wisconsin promoting this service. and they had it in various states. Sometimes I would fly out to the East Coast and work in colleges there, like Gallaudet, and be able to support some of them in the TRS services. So TRS is a little different, but that's kind of what I did at the time. Then I went ahead and moved to South Dakota. I worked various jobs there. And there was one company that I loved. It was called Reorganization, that I was there every year. Every summer, they would have a new position. So I would be able to get a different position the next year. They always were kind of shifting positions, which was great. I was a call center manager for a while, again for TRS services. I was responsible for 250 call operators at the center, their schedules, their trainings, consistently the quality of service, making sure that it was always the best service that we could offer. I also had various positions as a project manager for those organizations. Also, I did some research and development, R&D. And then the last part I was responsible for at the resort center. Oh, I was a resort center, essentially. Oftentimes they'd have weddings or they'd have special events, even hunting programs, things like that, that I would be responsible for doing that. They'd have year-round events held in that location. So once then I went ahead and moved to Indiana. As I had stated earlier, I set up established an interpreting agency, and I also taught for 5 years at a college. So I think that with all of that experience has again contributed to what I do and what I know as an entrepreneur today, as someone who's a freelance interpreter, a freelance certified interpreter working. I'm able to kind of be able to put myself in various situations and know the context in which I'm walking in because of just all of these experiences that I've had. So a hearing interpreter is a little different than a certified interpreter. They have to essentially be a hearing interpreter. It's a little bit easy for them to contract with 2 or 3 various agencies within their immediate area, and their schedule is full. They have a lot of job opportunities. But with a certified deaf interpreter, it's different. They have to contract with local areas, and sometimes if there's not enough work, they have to kind of promote themselves and market themselves to a wider network. So that's kind of where my marketing skill has come into the picture. I think there's various skills, again, that I've picked up and acquired through the years, which has offered myself and been able to market myself in a better way as a CDI. For instance, like government rules, working as an LLC, knowing how to establish a business. I've picked up that through just all of these life experiences that I've had contributing to the work that I'm doing today as a CDI, freelance CDI. I think that pretty much answers the question. So I'll go ahead and pass it off.
Awesome. Thank you, Roger. Yeah, that covered a lot of ground. Thank you so much. And Mahela, I'm going to turn it over to you. What sort of training, support, anything else, college, vocational programs, mentoring, accommodations, what needed to happen for you to be who you are today?
Well, first of all, like starting in high school, I really wanted to become a family counselor. I wanted to work with parents who had children with various disabilities, and I wanted to help them try to navigate the supports to figure out what they would need for their children. So I went to college, got my BA in psychology, and before that, I had applied for services with DVR in Oregon. And I was accepted, and they supported my bachelor's degree. And I went to Western Oregon University. And during that time, I was exposed to VR. But previously, I had no experience or understanding of what they did or what they were really doing. What did that even really mean? And so then I was able to learn more as I navigated that as a client and decided to transition to become a VR counselor. But that required a master's degree. So I also needed to have experience working with deaf and hard of hearing individuals. And so for 2 years, I was able to work in a group home and was able to support various clients and was able to learn so much information through that experience. I was then accepted for my master's program at Western Oregon and did my master's there as well. I just so happened to meet my husband from Alaska, and there was DVR in Alaska. And I was like, ooh, I want an internship. So I contacted Dwayne Mays. At the time, he was a counselor in Alaska, and I continuously reached out to him. And I can again and again and again, just making sure he would remember who I was. And then finally, he accepted me and was able to provide me an internship. And that was back in 2005. Oh my goodness, I feel so old. Okay, I was just recently turned 24 and I was moving from Oregon to Alaska. And it was just so much amazing support through the DVR office. And luckily, I was had an on-staff interpreter for me as a counselor and the other counselors that were there that required interpreting services as well. So that was one major benefit, to have that immediate accommodation to navigate this new job. And then I would be able to communicate with my clients as well. That was so nice. And the making sure I had captions too, or if I needed cart services in different settings, I was able to make that accommodation request as well. And then establishing my business now, I can't afford an interpreter, and doing things on Zoom, using the captioning, especially for meetings with the variety of agencies that I partner with. And if needed, I will request an interpreter, and most of the time, the other agencies will provide the interpreter if needed that I'm working with. I do have hearing aids that are Bluetooth, so I'm able to connect to my phone, but typically that is like a last resort. I don't like or prefer to talk on the phone. I would prefer email or using captioning or using an interpreter. But those are the typical accommodations that I need when navigating through my day. And really just kind of looking at two supervisors that I had previously under DVR's time frame that I worked there, one being Macrina Fazio, and I came in a young 24-year-old as an intern, and I had so much to learn what it meant to work within the deaf community, what services look like. And she was able to teach me so much and help me grow and match my personality as well, and really made sure that I was providing such great services to our deaf and hard of hearing clients, provided great feedback. And when she left, her replacement, another amazing individual, Gina Bastion, who is now the manager of the office. And she is amazing. She is passionate, she is motivated, she wants to make things happen, and she wants to see the benefit of the community. And she just jumped in with both feet, learning more about deaf services and how to make that apply to our business and how to make that apply to our office as well. So I have really accepted that and made that kind of my way of life.
This is Angela speaking, and I cheat a little bit because I have been working with Mihaela since 2008. I started off as her assistant. So I was an assistant to two counselors who provided deaf and hard of hearing services. I later became a counselor myself. And so Mihaela and I were both the deaf and hard of hearing deafblind specialists in the Anchorage area. So I've been able to watch her. So all of her mentors were also my mentors as well. So the entire time she's telling the story, I'm just like looking back on my own memories of similar stuff. So, but yes, thank you for sharing. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to you for the next question.
Okay. So number 4, the question being, McLean, you'll start us off. Who was your role model growing up? Who did you look up to? And why?
Ooh. Hmm. Though there are many people who have impacted my life for various reasons, I think probably the major ones, my mother being one. she doesn't like talking about her hearing loss a lot, and I learned that a lot more growing up because I would go on the news and talk a lot about growing up with my mom who has this very similar hearing loss. She was a school teacher and she didn't wear hearing aids, but yet she was one of the best teachers at a high school that was for math. But she was just so really good at her job. But as I've gotten older, um, whenever I talk about it with her, she doesn't like talking about it because her mother forced her to live like that and said, "I don't want my daughter to have hearing aids," which is why I wanted you and your brother to have hearing aids. And so, just having somebody who you just don't realize how fortunate, or I didn't, until I was a lot older, to have a parent who went through that and knew how much of a struggle it was. Because I meet so many parents who are hearing who want the best for their kids, but they don't know what that means because they've never been through these things. And so I am extremely thankful every day. And I always tell her that I'm not ashamed that you gave me a hearing loss. If anything, if I didn't have the upbringing I had, I wouldn't be able to help anyone because I just wouldn't have a rational thought of how to do it, how to care for people who are going through this. But I learned it all from my mother. So I 100%. She's a lot of the person I am today, along with my father. He's not hard of hearing himself, but he obviously financially made sure that if I needed anything for that, because he knew that he wanted the best for our kids. So that was one, and it's great having a support system like that. And then another person in my life who taught me a lot about how I do business and really go about the networking and social aspect. I did work for ABC for a little bit, and they had me do an acting part for one day. And through passing the director of photography, for those who don't know, it's the guy who does all the lighting and not the director, but basically the second command for everything. He approached me on set and he's like, "Hey, are you just standing for one of the actors?" And I'm like, "No," and I don't know what you're talking about. It's like, "Well, would you like to?" And I'm like, "I don't know who you are, so probably not because I want to be an actor." Whatever reason, I just thought I knew it all. And then some people approach me and they're like, "Oh, that's a director of photography." I'm like, "Oh, okay. What should I know about him?" "Well, he does all the films for Seth MacFarlane, so he's a very big deal. And if he asks you to be here, you probably should take the offer." I'm like, "All right, well." And so I was like, "Okay, I'll do it." And so for 3 months, I got to know him, and the reason why he's a big role model to me, um, is one day on set, I was like, "Hey, I'm going to come back for next season," because they have, you do it for 3 months and then you go off and everyone goes, and he goes back to LA. Um, but I told him this. I was like, "I'm going to come back." He's like, "You should come back." I'm like, "Why? Do you not enjoy my company?" He's like, "No, I really enjoy your company. I really enjoy your personality. I really enjoy you as a person. But that's exactly why you shouldn't come back if this isn't what you want to do in life." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "A lot of people who are in the positions or in jobs they don't like is because they don't have a personality or they aren't the person that makes it easy to work with them as a person." And that's my experience in the film world. If you're not, if you don't have a great personality, if you're not genuine or a person that everyone can get along with for 3 months or a month, it's why people don't want to work with you. And that's really, if you want to be successful in life, that's what you got to do. I'm like, "You really think that?" He's like, "That's all. That's the whole reason why I hired you. You're not as tall as these actors." And I was like, "Oh, that's right." And he's like, "Yeah, it really comes down to who you are, how you treat other people, and your personality. If you don't have a good outlook, or you aren't positive, or you're not nice to everyone around you, why would anyone want to work with you? So you should do what you want in life because you can do it if you really care about it a ton. I don't want you to come back." And at the time, I was really frustrated. But now that I'm at the position I am, I mean, a lot of the people I've met, they say the same thing to me. They're just like, "Your personality is really just why people want you to be around, just for fun, not to even be around for business, just to be a friend." Because and I think in these times, it's hard to find people who are genuine, who really do care and want to listen to what you have going on in life and care about the things you care about while not making it about themselves and having other exterior motives. And so it's why I do a lot of the business I do. I don't have an exterior motive to take advantage of people or things like that. It's just I genuinely want to figure out solutions and help people and provide solutions to other people. Because the more you help other people, the more opportunities it provides to you. So those are probably the biggest role models. There's obviously other people, but I only have 3 minutes to talk about things. So those are probably the most impactful people, and why I view them as role models in my life.
Thank you so much. Now over to Vanessa. What is your role model and why?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, McLean. That's a lot of wise wisdom that you had in your commentary. That's really great. Um, I love hanging out with wise people because I feel like it makes me wiser. So it's always great to listen to all individuals and just the different comments that they have because I learn so much from them. I'll go ahead and just summarize really quick. Hold on one second. Okay, I'm here to shift something really quick. I've noticed that role models for me is something, at least from my experience, if I look up to an individual, that position changes. Like that's a pedestal that changes depending on my life, depending on the phase that I'm in. It's not always the same person. As my values change, as the things that I see in life as important change, that role model position, that pedestal changes. I think growing up, I always looked up to my dad specifically because we had a kind of a love-hate relationship a little bit, but he was very intelligent. He was very philosophical, and he kind of pushed me out of the box a little bit to take a bird's eye view of like conspiracy theories and ghosts, and just kind of think in a way that was, I guess you could say, a little bit more of the macabre, but just different ways of thinking. So I always looked up to him because he was just someone who always thought out of the box and had different strategies on looking at life. My mom too, she taught me to become just gentle with myself. I've always struggled with accepting myself as a deafblind individual. That's an identity I've always fought with, and it's something I've accepted proudly later, but I would say it wasn't until about senior in high school that I actually did that. And every time, I have my eyesight would fade a little bit. It was just difficult, and I'd have to kind of rearrange how I dealt with things and how I saw the world. And of course, with communication, learning how to do that pro-tactile method. That's something that I've had to develop in the later part of my life. So constantly having these changes and going through grief cycles, um, which people, when they lose individuals, it actually coincides, like if someone were to lose a partner or something, it coincides with a lot of the emotions that I feel myself. So she's always been very supportive and reminding me to be gentle with myself every time I lose vision or I lose sight, and have to kind of restructure how I navigate this world. I think that it's always been very helpful. Her support has always been helpful. I think leaving the island for me, when I was working there, I stayed for 3 years, was really difficult too because of my students. I mean, they had no language, and I just really connected with them. And I was kind of like their mom, if you will, just kind of being that role. And so leaving was super difficult, and I was having a hard time with that. My grandfather was someone I looked up to too. I called him Papa. I want to make sure it's kind of the Southern North Carolina thing, country word Papa. We never say grandpa, but Papa. My Papa, he encouraged me when I was leaving the island and really struggling with that change. That I'm kind of going a little bit, jumping ahead of myself a little bit, but on the island, I had a friend of mine who was very close named Davina, and we were just best friends, and she really inspired me to think bigger, to dream bigger, to set up a deaf school. Or she wanted, like, one of her goals was to have some sort of an academic system on the island that could have dorms where we could take deaf people from all over the different islands and have one place for them to live and coexist and be peers and learn from each other. And that was something that really encouraged me to think bigger, like I was saying, to just think about some of these possibilities that could happen. And I applied a lot of the things that she said to becoming an astrologist, like think bigger, dream bigger, and do these things. So Davina became one of those people. I think she inspired me essentially to move to America and become an astrologist. And I don't know, just some of that, we still keep in contact. She is now actually an assistant, one of my assistants at Astro Woke. So really excited for her to be even a closer companion of mine through the years. And then I would say, like I said, my Papa, he just always had that very strong religious, believed in God. I kind of grew up atheist, and I was always questioning, like, if God was real, kind of looking for God in places and trying to figure out what I believe myself. I think that a lot of people who fall into the spiritual realm go through a dark time, and I did too, like just kind of feeling like, what is faith and what does that look like? And I feel like I always looked to my papa, and he was always an inspiration to me because he had such a strong sense of faith, and it was so grounded and rooted. And he was such a simple man, a man of very few words. But at the same time, the things that he said were so impactful and very thought provoking. So leaving the island, I was having such a hard time. So I called my papa, what do I do? Like, these children, they just need me. And he said something very simple. And he was like, just move on and don't look back. And for me, that was, kind of just, it's almost like don't look in the rear view of a car. You just keep going and you keep driving. And that was a reminder, I guess, of just that feeling that, I don't know if it was like Moses who said it, but looking back in the Old Testament, and not Moses, but looking back in the Old Testament, and there's a scene in there where the person said, you need to leave, don't look back. And one individual looked back and they became a pillar of salt. And that was really impactful to just it was a metaphor essentially, that missing and stuff, of course you miss them, of course you do this stuff, but at the same time, like, don't look back, because if you look back, there's nothing going to be profitable there for you. So I think that story from just his biblical and religious background was really what I needed at that time. So, and of course now it's been able to jumpstart my astrology, and I've been able to do some even greater things as I've moved on and been able to go forward. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your comments and your perspective. Now moving over to Mick.
And then this is Vanessa, just really quick. I do have to run a little bit early. So I've got to run a little bit early, so wanna head out. But thank you everyone so much for this wonderful panel. Thank you for having me here. I appreciate it. Nice to meet everyone.
Bye, Vanessa. Thank you.
Okay, now over to Mick. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I would connect it to working with, I feel like I don't have a specific role model for work. Like I mentioned before, I did have just some really amazing teachers that I looked up to and idolized, and watched them give back, and I wanted to be able to do the same. In real estate, I think I have a network of friends, colleagues, people that I know that are in the industry, various colleagues, and we brainstorm ideas and things like this. But I think my father, though, I look up to my dad for work ethic. I think he worked a lot of hours, but I think two important things in him that I got that I have incorporated, especially for my children too, is that he never missed a sporting event, not even once. He would rearrange his work schedule so that he was able to be at all my games, and my brothers as well. He did not miss a single event ever. And secondarily, he said family dinner every night. On occasion, there would be a few exceptions, right? Maybe something would come up or there was an event or something. That's a different story. But on the regular, a family dinner, because there's an opportunity to talk about your day. So you're able, and those two I definitely have incorporated into my life. I don't miss my children's games, no matter how busy my schedule is. They are priority one, and family dinner every night. And that gives me an opportunity to connect with my kids and be able to ask, how was your day? What can I do for you? What's going on? So I think those two aspects, I look up to those because, again, all of my life, they were consistent aspects of my life. And I think there's a lot that happened with him. But those two, even today, my father will still text me and say, hey, are you guys still doing family dinner? You're not, and not missing a game. And so he'll stay on top of me for that. But I'd say he's my role model.
Oh, that's so heart-touching. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, and now over to Roger. Your turn. Who is your role model growing up and why?
Mick, that was a great story. Yeah, absolutely. So my role model, I would say Jesus. If you actually look at his life, and really, it was very radical. I think that he really entered the world and did a lot of changes to the system and expectations, the way people were thinking, the rules, all of these things. I think that it was more of really just some of the impact that he had. I think that there were thoughts and things that he gave us through his life that we can learn from, that not necessarily follow a hard set of rules, but to live life and kind of model like he is. I think that the forgiveness that is modeled in his life and the love that he shows, I think that it's still something that is important, and he stands for the truth. I think that those are all things that I try to incorporate in my life as well every day. I know that people, we all go through phases. We all make mistakes. There's no one perfect answer, and we all try to look at people, their motivations, and oftentimes individuals don't necessarily have the mindset of wanting to take advantage or wanting to do something bad. But you think of media, and social media is constantly trying to divide people into two different sub factions. When in reality, like, we need to look at ourselves about care for each other and care for each other in a way that we're not divided. So I think that how the media makes it look like it's just, we feel like there's a war between various groups of people, and I just don't think that's true. So I guess that's kind of a summary. That's kind of who I look up to and how I live my life.
Thank you so much. And now it's my turn. Who
Who's
do
your
I look
role
up to? Who is your role model? Thank you for asking me the question. So honestly, I really don't like that question. I feel kind of stuck with it. I don't really have a role model growing up. Me being hard of hearing deaf student in a hearing school, I didn't really have exposure to a lot. So it was very isolating, and I didn't really have somebody out there that I would be able to connect with until college, really. But looking back, what I wrote down would definitely be my faith, really kind of navigating through taking the hard school of hard knocks, if you will, learning through my isolation of high school, and then getting to college and really starting to meet other professionals and meet other individuals that I was able to learn from, and really diving in to the deaf culture and understanding what that looks like, which really helped me identify who I was as an individual, and starting down the path of vocational rehab and working with those two amazing supervisors. Those two in the rehab world, they were motivated, they were inspiring, they were the best counselors and challenged me to be the best counselor. So looking back, really, they helped me get through, in my relationship with God, of course, learning how to build those relationships. And what does relationship really even mean? Being able to continue that ministry and working with in that deaf and hard of hearing world, and especially back in Oregon, to now being involved in helping young youth and helping teens navigate and learn about Jesus Christ is so important, and feeling the value and importance of that and having that help me navigate here on earth.
This is Angela. I'm actually kind of glad that you mentioned that you didn't have a role model growing up, because I don't think that is an uncommon experience for youth, especially some youth with disability who they might be the only deaf or hard of hearing person in their family. And so having that exposure, like, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because there are other people who are going to experience similars. And so when they get that question older, like, they might not have something, but knowing that we can still get connected, we can still reach out, like, this is why we do this, like, someone may not even meet you, but could see the journey that you took, and you could become their role model someday. So that's kind of why we have this discussion, is to try to help promote that it's okay. Yeah, Mahela, go ahead.
I also just want to add, my children, they have really helped me become a better person as well. and they each have their own unique needs, and between autism and hearing loss, and they have all taught me how to be a better role model as well, and what that could look like, and how to dream just a little bit bigger or be a little bit more flexible or compassionate. So yes, definitely my children.
Thank you. So we have 20 minutes. I'm just gonna put it out there. We have two more questions, and I did this to us last year, where we have 6 questions, and we only got through 5 because I have a hard time interrupting people if they go past their 3 minutes because everyone's telling great stories, and I don't want to interrupt any of these stories. So we're gonna get through what we can, which is gonna put us at question number 5. So McLean, you're gonna start us off again. What advice do you have for youth considering what they want to do when they grow up or how to get into your field?
All right, so I gotta do it in 30 seconds. All right, that's what you're telling me. All right, let's do
False,
this.
false. You take as much time as you need. I just wanted to let you know that as a whole, we've got 20 minutes left before we're going to respect people's time and kick everyone out.
I get it. I get it. No, yeah. Well, advice. Be the interpreters like Maria and Ryan and Lisa. I mean, then you have a great job and you don't have to make a business. No, I'm kidding, but I love interpreters. So thank you, for doing that for us. I would say advice. Well, obviously, my dad gave me the best advice whenever I was thinking about careers. He said, as long as you're happy doing it and you can make money, doesn't matter about how much money you're making, as long as you're making some money and you're able to live life, that's all you need in life. You don't need to make a bunch of money, and everyone thinks that's what it's all about at the end of the day. So that's one thing to consider whenever you want to. If you want to be able to enjoy life to the fullest, then make sure you find something you enjoy and figure out how you can make money doing it. That's why I do the things I do. I enjoy what I do, and I don't strive to make money off people unless people want to give me money, like sponsors and stuff, which that happens a lot. If you're wanting to do what I do, it depends on what area. Concerts, a lot of how I got started in it is I would invest. I mean, some shows I did $50 to $100,000 shows where it'd be my own personal money I would put up to make shows happen. Those get really crazy. You need to understand what you're getting yourself into, and I wouldn't advise it to a lot of people. I would say have a good mentor, as in previous mention. If you do want to do stuff like that, you can always reach out to me. I always love helping people make a very smart decision because I know many people have tried, and I would never want them to fail. And if I can help prevent it, I would. Um, if you're wanting to be more bigger advocate for your specific disability or certain things, you just need to, for my personal experience, speak up more. You just got to speak up what you need. Um, it's very daunting, obviously, but a lot of people understand. A lot of people who are sympathetic, I think, nowadays to understanding if somebody really addresses what they need in life, they will do the best they can. They may not have ideally what you want, but they will hear you out and at least make an attempt, which does bring some hope back in the situation. So, if there's other areas you wanting more about what I do and advice for it, always you can reach out, and I'm always available to help out and do however what other area, whether it's music, film, or business to business stuff, just reach out. But I'm going to keep my comments to a minimum because she'll yell at me if I don't. So I will do that.
Well, thank you, McLean, for that. Mick, the answer goes to you, or the question goes to you now. What advice do you have for youth considering what it is they want to do when they grow up on a general note? And then what type of information or advice do you have for people exploring your field?
I think this is where my tough love comes in with youth in particular. I often see so many youth, deaf specifically. I'm speaking directly to deaf and hard of hearing youth on this. I often see them make the common mistake of limiting themselves to only seeking information in the deaf community. I would caution against that. Then this is not to be offensive in the deaf community in any way, but the deaf community is very small. And when the experience is focused more on breaking the barriers, then it may be applicable to keep it within the community. But I think that they need to know the nuts and bolts of running a business. And so my advice in general is yes, tap into the deaf community for their lived experience. What are their struggles? What are those nuances, cultural pieces? Definitely tap into that. But don't be afraid to approach hearing people. Some people will reject you or ignore you, and that's fine. Let them be them. That's fine. But one day, you'll do better than they're doing, right? If you just keep going. So I think I don't care if you can't speak. I don't care if your English is not perfect. It doesn't matter. There are hearing people that will respect your effort. Maybe you write via paper. Maybe you text on the phone and show your thoughts. There's a lot of hearing people out there who now have ego. They take advantage of that, right? They love to talk about what they do. Hey, tell me about this. Can you show me? What do you do for work? Tap into that. And they love to show you and to tell you what they've accomplished. I don't speak perfectly. I don't have perfect English. Well, maybe I do. I guess I don't know. But I have assertiveness, and I have had people, kind of ignore me, not take me seriously, or tell me to find something else to do with my time. But ultimately, I persisted. And there are people out there who are willing to show you and to introduce you to the right people. So I think you can't be afraid to do that. And you can't be afraid of that rejection. And you have to be, really, spread out as much as you can. Again, I graduated from YouTube University, but that's not enough. Right. So I guess that would be my advice for deaf and hard of hearing youth of getting out of that community. There is more out there. There's more beyond the community. And again, that is not in any way to disrespect the deaf community. I love them. I've learned more from hearing people in some cases because they have not had to fight through the barriers. So in some ways they're more ahead and they're able to share that professional knowledge. And in recent cases, partnership with my construction company. Those are all hearing individuals, again, because I reached out to them, had the conversations directly with them, via text, and it's a work in progress on that side, but it can be done. So, again, getting out of that limited community mindset, and don't be afraid of that rejection because it does happen, but life moves on.
This is Angela, and yes, thank you, Mick, for that answer. And I'm going to say it's not just hearing people that have ego. I think it's everybody that has a good, healthy ego that, like, you ask someone what have you accomplished? Where are you? Like, what have you done? Can you tell me more about this? Like, I think most people, if you ask them about something they know they're good at, they're going to come out and they're going to tell you, because when you ask them about something they're passionate about and they know about, they will talk about it forever. So yeah, I second that, and I really encourage people to do that. Really ask people about their passions, because you're going to learn a lot from someone going on for an hour about, I don't know, ask any nerd about Star Wars or Star Trek. They're going to go on forever. Ask someone about construction. If construction is their thing, they will go on forever. So yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that. All right, Roger, the question now comes to you. What advice do you have for youth in general while they're considering their career goals? And then any advice you have specific for people looking to enter your field?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this applies really to everyone, youth, adults, just kind of the whole spectrum. I know that many companies establish a
Mission.
a mission statement, as well as a vision statement. For the mission statement, I mean, we are here. It's basically why we're here, why the company is established. And the vision statement is, where are we going? Where's the end goal? What does it look like in 3 years, 5 years? So for example, McDonald's, I'll just kind of come up with a hypothetical example. I think their mission statement is something to create the best hamburger experience ever. I think I did read that somewhere before. I think that's actually their mission statement. It could have changed in the last number of years, but that's just an example. It doesn't have to be anything that's super elaborate or fancy, but it's just to create the best burger experience ever. And that's their mission statement. At least at one point it was. I'm not sure if it still is, but and then as far as their vision statement is concerned, it could be something like to take 7% of the market within 5 years, something like that. So now why limit that to the company specifically? Like, we as people and individuals, we should have our own kind of learn from from those companies and have our own mission and vision statements as well. I think that would help us as individuals. Some days, it can be really frustrating. You feel lost or feel like, am I doing the right thing? But if you've already written down something or have something in mind that is a mission statement that's supporting, why am I here? What am I doing? And what is the vision? Where am I going? Maybe that mission statement and that vision statement will change, and that's fine. I think that they can be adaptable. It takes time. It takes years. But I think reviewing them and making sure that they are adaptable to fit who you are in the phase that you in. But just to have some kind of foundation, I think, is so important for us as individuals, and something to keep in mind as we go forward. As new opportunities come up and we want this, or we're going in between some of the things that opportunities that are coming up, I think that it's important to figure out if they align with our mission statement and our vision statement as far as where we're going. I think it's really important. So that's one of the points. That's one of the things that I've constantly thought about, is develop your own personal and individual mission statement and vision statement. I think that that's really important to kind of establish on your own going forward.
Thank you for sharing that. This is Mihaela, because I am a new entrepreneur, and if somebody asks me, or if I'm questioning myself of why I'm doing this, it would be great to have that mission and vision statement to refer to kind of reignite that passion and that motivation. So that is vitally important and really can make changes. I mean, it doesn't have to stay like that and be stagnant forever. So I really appreciate that comment, and that is an experience that I am going to incorporate and can use, so I don't feel lost wandering out in space. But thank you so much for that.
There's so many opportunities. Sometimes it's like a kid at a candy store, and I think it's important to hone in on it keeps you on track, essentially, on what's actually important and what are some of the values that you hold in your life.
Thank you so much.
I'm not going to forget you. I'll turn it back over to you for yours. But I was going to add on, that's actually a lot of work I'm doing recently with the clients that I work with, is helping people really start to own what are their strengths and what are their interests and what are their internal values and how does that relate. So I'm a voc rehab counselor. Everything about me is work. How does that relate to the world of work? And so you talking about mission statement, vision statement, like that's a lot of what I've started doing with a lot of my clients. Is a lot of them don't understand, like, oh yeah, I'm good at math, or I'm good at this and I'm good at that. And so encouraging them to own that, like, that is a truth about you. And that is something you get to take into the world of work. You need to adopt that as part of your personality beyond, oh yeah, I like this color and this is my favorite food and I can't stand olives. Whatever it is, those are nice little fun facts. But like having the mission statement, the vision statement, the truths that are objective about what are their strengths and their interests and their values. This is something that I'm witnessing is being really helpful for my clients that I'm working with. So thank you for bringing that up. Mihaela.
So my advice related to this topic of employment, when I was a counselor, I would preach to my clients that if you want to become or establish your own business and becoming your own boss, you have to learn the field first. What works for one person, like for example, if you want to establish a coffee cart or a coffee location, you need to learn how to make coffee first and be good at it. So making sure that if you're establishing a coffee place, what does that clientele look like? What do the finances look like? What would be the projections? How would you run that business? And what training and experience do you need for that to be successful before you make that decision as self-employment? So if you have no work experience and you're just jumping in the deep end and you don't know anything about the field, I would recommend to increase your experience, learn, understand the market that you want to be involved in and providing for that business. It's just one simple advice.
Well, we're at the 5-minute left mark, and I did it again. Question number 6 will not be asked this time. Um, that's okay. One day we will get to question number 6. That day is not today. I did get notification that if you had invited someone to this panel and they weren't able to make it in, apparently we were having some people getting um, difficulties accessing the Zoom meeting. So I am sorry. This is recorded. It is going to be posted on the Alaska DVR YouTube page, so it can be shared and referenced at a later date. So much apologies to the people who couldn't make it. I question opening it up for questions. I don't think we're going to have enough time to do a question and then have it go around the loop. So instead, I'll just say that number one, on the behalf of the Alaska Division of Vocational Rehabilitation and the Deaf and Hard of Hearing team that we have here, thank you guys so much for your time. I know some of you are coming from the East Coast, which is 4 hours ahead of us. It is well into your evening time. Thank you so much for taking the time and
9
joining
p.m.
us.
over
You
here.
guys have a wealth of information that, and McLean, I'm going to call you out again. No shaking the head. Yes, you brought so much experience and great stories for us to be able to share with clients here, now, future. You're getting a whole bunch of thanks in the questions or in the comment section. Thank you so much for taking the time. We appreciate everything that you do and the time you took for us. For our audience, thank you guys so much for joining. This is all for you guys, and we wouldn't be able to do it without you guys. So thank you so much. Everyone have a wonderful evening. Take care of yourselves and stay safe.